Hey guys, my name's Autumn McEntee, and today we're going to be tying the llama. To tie the llama, you're going to need grizzly hackle, coyote fur, black thread, red floss, silver gold tinsel, and a size 6 to 12 streamer hook. The llama originated in the United States and Canada as a trout streamer, and today we're going to tie it with coyote fur instead of woodchuck fur. I'm tying this on a size 4 streamer hook today for viewing purposes. As soon as I've got my hook and my vise, I'm going to lay a nice base of thread, the black thread, over the shank of the hook with a couple forward wraps, and then wrapping back over the tail end of my thread the whole way back to where the beginning of the hook bend is. Making nice tight close together wraps to get a really good base on that shank of the hook so that our materials don't move, because we do have quite a bit of material going on this fly today. And in order to incorporate the fly tying with fur into our tying of the llama streamer today, we're going to be using coyote fur for the wing instead of woodchuck fur as the recipe calls for. The recipe I got from Gene Kugak's Fly Fishers pattern book, and we're going to be tying it pretty close to his original recipe, as I like to call it. So when you've got your thread wrapped back to the start of the bend of the hook, I'm going to go ahead and snip off my excess thread. And then our very first material we're going to be tying in is the tail. So we're going to take our grizzly hackle and pick out a nice feather that looks like it'll work for our hackle later, and something that's mid-sized from the middle of a hackle. And I'm looking, and sometimes it's hard to get a good one, but I think that one will work. And we're going to pluck those little fuzzy feathers off of the bottom. We're going to try to get a bunch of them to bunch them together to make a decent looking tail. This feather in particular doesn't have a whole lot of fuzzies on the bottom. That's not quite enough. I think I need a couple more. So I'm going to pull just a couple more off and bunch them all together, make sure they're as even as I can get them. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm going to tie them in, put them on top of the shank of the hook, and measure it out. I want them to extend probably a half of a hook shank length past the bend of the hook. So I'm going to put them on, squeeze them onto the top of the shank, and make a couple nice tight wraps. Make sure my material is not going anywhere. Wrap forward just a little bit, make sure they lay down nice. And I can clip off this excess. The next material we're going to tie in is going to be our tinsel. So whether you have silver or gold tinsel, doesn't really matter. I've got a silver and gold tinsel. It's silver on one side and gold on the other. And please take better care of your tinsel than I do, because I couldn't find the end there for a good minute. So you're going to want to take probably about 6 inches of tinsel, and watch as my scissors do not cut. There we go. And our bobbin's still hanging out at the back by the bend of the hook. So we're just going to tie that in on top of the shank of the hook with some nice tight wraps. Make sure it's not going anywhere. And this recipe is pretty versatile. You can use different colors of tinsel. You can use different colors of floss, depending on your liking. And then our next material we're going to tie in is our floss. So for this particular pattern, I'm using red floss, and you're going to want to take probably a 12-inch section and fold it in half so it's doubled over. This is what I did here, if I can get the ends even. I think that's probably as good as I'm going to get. And I learned this trick from Savage Flies. If you tie it in, we're actually going to have to make a few loose wraps to the middle of the shank. And then we're going to tie it in the middle with some nice tight wraps. And then move our bobbin up to probably about a third of the way behind the eye of the hook, up the shank. And then we're going to wrap our floss back first, the whole way back to where our tail starts. And the goal here was to get sort of more volume in the body of the fly. So we're going to wrap back, and then we're going to wrap it forward because we're done tying things in at the back of the fly. So you can tie it in the middle, or you can tie it in at the back, whichever you prefer. And I'm going to try to go back over the middle and then back up, but I don't think I have enough. Nope, we're fraying. So I'm going to unwrap that and bring it back to the front, and I'm going to just catch that off with a couple of nice tight wraps to make sure that that floss body's not going to go anywhere. Sometimes you get too bold with fly tying, and that's okay. And as soon as that is caught off, I'm going to clip that off, and then it's time to wrap our tinsel up. Just going to lay down these couple stray pieces of thread that are sticking out from the floss. Maybe clip them off so we can clean it up here. Always being very careful not to cut the bobbin thread. And it's time to wrap our tinsel. This is a flat tinsel, not an oval tinsel, so I've got to be careful. One, that it's not under my tail, and two, that I'm wrapping it flat on around the floss body. Do some nice even wraps. The concentration here. And I think that looks good. As soon as I get to the end of that floss body, I'm going to bring it around, pull it forward, and then catch that off with some nice tight wraps. And as soon as I make sure my tinsel isn't going anywhere, I'm going to clip off the excess and almost cut my bobbin thread. And there we go. Just a couple more tight wraps, and we're going to move the bobbin back onto the floss body just a little bit because we've got a good chunk of fur to tie in here next. Like I said earlier, we're altering the original recipe or pattern by utilizing coyote fur for the wing instead of woodchuck fur. And coyote fur's got a lot of the same color quality, and we've also got the guard hair as well as the under fur that was sought after from the woodchuck hair. So I figured this would be a really good substitute and a great way to use tan coyote fur. So we're going to take a chunk about pencil thickness, I would say, and we're going to keep the under fur. You can pull out any of the real long guard hairs because coyotes do have some pretty long guard hairs. And I'm going to measure the wing. I'd like it to be 1.5 hook shanks long. So I'm going to trim that section off, and we're going to tie it in right where our bobbin's hanging. And you pull out the fuzzies of the under fur, anything that's loose, and that looks really good to me. So we're going to put it on top of the shank of the hook and tie it in with some nice tight wraps. Oh my god. Okay, well, that's the end of the video. Just kidding. Haha. So we've just broken our thread. Well, not we, I mean me. So in this situation, I can be thankful that I placed down just a couple of those extra thread wraps on top of the floss and as well as the tinsel. I'm definitely going to have to rewrap my tinsel, but in this situation, I get out my half-hitch tool and I undo just as much thread as I need to and wrap it around my half-hitch tool twice. And then hopefully that will kind of save the day. But the eye of this hook is too big for my half-hitch tool to fit over. You can also do this on your finger if you don't have a half-hitch tool handy. But yes, I am going to have to rewrap my tinsel. And that is totally fine as long as that floss stays in place. Because that is my last piece of red floss. Got the half hitch on there, and I do have some room at the front, right behind the eye of that hook, to lay down a little bit of another base layer of that thread. Got a couple half hitches on there, and we're gonna have to improvise here and do some wider wraps with the tinsel so that we've got enough material at the end that we're able to tie it off. So I'm just going to lay down another small base of thread. I did a couple forward wraps and then wrapped back over my loose end. I'm going to clip that off, being very careful not to cut the bobbin thread. And then, like I said, we're going to do some looser wraps with the tinsel. It's not going to look as nice as it did, but just making sure they're even again. And with enough material that we're able to successfully tie it off so it doesn't go anywhere. And hopefully we don't have to retie again. And there we go. Did some tight wraps on there, clipping the excess off. All right, and I'm gonna do some more good old tight wraps on there. Do you ever just forget what direction you're wrapping in? Because I do that occasionally. All right, now it's time to actually tie in our coyote fur wing. So we're gonna pick that chunk of fur back up, and we're going to try this again. We're going to make some nice tight wraps to tie it in, but not too tight, apparently. We don't want to stress out the thread and make it break again. So we've got a couple nice tight wraps on there. It's looking good. I like the way it's measuring. I'm going to pull through just a little bit. That looks great to me. I'm going to tie it in with some tighter wraps now and then clip off the excess on the end. Want to make sure that's not going anywhere. And wrap in just those loose ends. Now we've just got two more things to place on our fly. Next is going to be our hackle. We're going to use that grizzly hackle feather from earlier. I've got faith that it's going to be a nice one. That's going to be a good size for this streamer. So when you tie in your hackle, you want the shiny side facing toward the eye of the hook and the dull side facing away from the eye of the hook. So I stripped all the fuzzy feathers off of that end, and I'm going to tie it in right in front of where we had tied that coyote fur in. And then I'm going to clip off that excess and apply my hackle. And I'm not quite sure how many wraps I'm going to get out of this. I could probably use my hackle pliers and get a couple extra. But I'd like this to be pretty beefy. Yeah, we're going to get out the hackle pliers and just pinch them onto the tip of that hackle feather. Look at that. I like how even that is. That's pretty aesthetically pleasing to me. All right, I think that's about all that we're going to get. So I'm going to pull that forward and just make a couple tight wraps to make sure that that's not going anywhere, because I'm not sure if I'll get a wrap that nice again. As you can see, I'm very pleased with my work. And just a couple more tight wraps just in case. And we're going to snip off the end of that feather. Look at that. Isn't she beautiful? And to make sure she stays beautiful, we're going to put a couple half hitches on there, because I am not interested trying to do that again if my thread breaks. So I'm going to put just a couple half hitches on there to secure everything that I just did before we do the final step. All right, now I feel much better. It's like having insurance when you do half hitches between steps. So the last part of our fly is we're going to make a head. So we're going to essentially build up that thread and taper it from smallest at the eye of the hook to largest where it meets the hackle material, to make it look like a black head on our streamer. And this is a lot of wrapping and a lot of stopping and looking and judging, and also holding back the hackle to make sure that it doesn't get stuck in your wrapping. And I'm going to speed it up here because I did spend quite a bit of time wrapping. But you can see it's slowly growing. It slowly gets bigger. It does slowly get bigger. And it was about here that I thought, yeah, that kind of looks like a head. So there we go. And I'm picking back any strays that I see, and yeah, I could probably use a couple more wraps. All right, that looks good to me. So now it's time for a whip finish. And whip finish, you're going to want to make a 4 with your thread and wrap it. All right, okay, good job, Autumn. All right, let's try that again. 1, we're going to wrap it about 4 times around the eye of the hook. And we're actually going to double whip finish today because I'm not entirely confident in the way that went. So make that 4 with our thread and wrap it around the eye. And there we go. Clip off the bobbin, and then with some head cement, this llama is going to be good to go. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Look at that. I'm pretty proud of this one. And there you have it, the llama streamer. Thanks for watching.